there's all these stories about, guys over in Macedonia who are running these fake news sites.
Number 24 is Content Farms in Macedonia.
Бидејќи ако се направи грешка, таа ќе биде кобна. Нема враќање назад.
So Europe need to remain more sexy lady in the world.
Ајде, мајката!
Господа ја чува Македонија и низините граѓани.
Even before receiving a mandate from Stevo Pendarovski to form a new government, the quote, new unquote, SDSM leader, Dimitar Kovacevski, met with the U.S. Prime Minister, President, and Pope of Macedonia, U.S. Ambassador Kate Byrnes, who asked Kovacevski to kiss her ring. Okay, the kissing of the Holy Ring did not happen, but Dimche running to see Kate shows us two things. First, he doesn't really believe in the sovereignty of Macedonia, and two, he's really just a suck-up. But before he started sucking up to Katie, Dimche started making changes to the party leadership in this last week of 2021. At the same time, loyalists of the recently departed Zoran Zaev are themselves departing the government. Perhaps they hold an impending sense of doom for their party, their government, and their future. And perhaps sensing blood in the proverbial waters, or at least just an opportunity to create lanes for themselves, some former SDSM officials are now announcing that they will form new political parties. We'll discuss all of this and more on this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the foot of the Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin Šelimanov in Skopje, Macedonia.
How you doing, Svetin?
Good. Busy times here.
Yeah, well, this is, we kind of call this here in the States Dead Week. So we're recording this on Wednesday, the 29th of December. So just 3 days left in this calendar year. We just celebrated Christmas as Mia in Macedonia says, the Catholic Christmas. Although always leaving out, the Protestants for some reason. I'll never understand that. But so we just celebrated Catholic Christmas here. We got New Year's coming up on Friday, and so this is kind of dead week. A lot of companies let their employees have the week off. Obviously, school's out of session, and it's one of those weeks where you wake up and you're never quite sure what day of the week is it, what is the date, etc. Of course, in Macedonia, we're preparing to celebrate Christmas next week, but first, obviously, New Year's happens everywhere at the same time, oddly, so it is a busy week here. Although it's a strange busy week, just because a lot of people are still at home, families still gathering. You've got a lot of football games. Although I have to, one of our at the PR firm I work for, one of our clients is the Arizona Bowl. It's a college football game between two college teams, and it's done on it's played on Friday, the December 31st, although unfortunately they had to cancel it because of COVID. One of the teams couldn't make it, and other college football teams are also, or other holiday bowl games are also being canceled just because of COVID. It's a bit wild. So
yeah, I don't think there is any rule anymore. I mean, some are overreacting, some are underreacting. It's weird here as well. You have events being like Filipcho, the healthcare minister, is leaving office, obviously, and he had a meeting with a bunch of female journalists, a few men included in this mattering. No masks, just snapping pictures, posting them on social media. After badgering us for years, like put your mask, keep your distance. So people just like make it up on the go right now.
Yeah, interesting. I was listening. Who was I listening to or reading? I can't remember. Some conservative podcast the other day, and then we'll get into the Macedonian stuff here. But they said that prior to Omicron, so it was the Delta variant that was running rampant, because it wasn't as widely transmissible. The chattering classes, the far left, the liberals, the left, the Democrats, etc., who are all up in their ivory towers, protected, etc. They weren't getting the Delta variant, but it was reserved for the rubes in Florida and Texas, etc. But
to work
now,
in Walmart, have to work in Costco.
exactly, yeah, people that actually have to do something and
Yeah.
produce something instead of just sit and think and write.
Mm-hmm.
So they weren't getting it, but now with Omicron, they're getting it, and so they're reversing their
Okay,
position.
No more,
and
no
saying,
more isolation.
No more isolation. Everybody's going to get it. We're, etc. So it's typical hypocrisy from our friends on the left. But what
Yeah.
else can you expect? So
Yeah.
speaking of hypocrisy, so we've got the new prime minister designate or the citizen leader Dimitar Kovacevski, who ran to meet as soon as he is appointed by Citizen as the or appointed elected, I guess, as citizen leader, he runs off to meet Kate Byrnes, the U.S. ambassador, and kiss her ring, which I thought was quite telling, even before he got the mandate from Pendarovski. Anything juicy come out of that meeting? Was it? I didn't see that Kate posted anything, at least on social media.
No information of the content, but as you said, it was far more important for him to get this endorsement than the pro forma endorsement from Pendarovski today. And the PR team of SDSM made sure they, spread this photograph of Kovacevski and Kate Byrnes far and wide, so that everybody knows that this is the actual new designated prime minister. The suit the U.S. embassy chose to place in the office of prime minister right now, after Zaev is no more. So yeah, she practically endorsed him with this meeting, and Pendarovski today gave him the mandate. So now he has 20 days to negotiate. I mean, it's probably already negotiated, but to fine-tune the list of government members with DUI, with the Alternative Party, with a bunch of other smaller parties, which will now want a greater share of power, following in the footsteps of the Alternative Party, which got this huge windfall, the healthcare ministry and a bunch of other departments, in exchange for its 4 votes in parliament. Altogether, they should have 64 votes out of 120, so another extremely slim majority for SDSM, but technically you can call it a majority, and the vote will take place sometime in mid-January, early to mid-January, on the list of the government members and on the program of the government.
Right. So again, next week is Christmas in Macedonia. It's probably not going to happen next week. Maybe the week after. As you mentioned, 64 votes, assumably. But at the same time, of course, we know that some of these other smaller parties, DOM, LDP, what's Tito's party?
NSDP, the New Social Democratic Party.
Pavle Trajanov, his DS, etc. They were making some. They were grumbling a bit, shall we say, the past couple of weeks over what Alternative got versus what they didn't get. So I suppose there's still time for them to upset the party, so to speak.
Yeah.
So you got that, but assuming that Dimche can actually form a government, it's going to be shaky. He's got an all-new crew, or mostly all-new crew, as I mentioned in the monologue. A lot of Zaev loyalists are departing the government. So Shekarinska's out, Filipche's out, Spasovsky's out, Nikola Dimitrov is out, I believe.
Very likely, yes.
Very likely, okay. And then any names that come that might our listeners might be familiar with that he is putting into his leadership?
Well, this is the big story, actually. How thoroughly he purged Zaev's people from the government, or actually from the running of the party. We're yet to see the government, but there's a deputy leader of the party. There are 4 vice presidents of the party. There is 3 secretaries of the party. There is an executive board, and all of this is up for grabs. And Zaev's people were decimated. So Oliver Spasovsky is out, Ljubčo Nikolovsky is out, and these are the 2 most trusted people around Zaev. Venko Filipče more recently became an extremely close person to Zaev. He was vice president of the party. He's removed. Ljubcho Nikolovsky was secretary general of the party, so he's out. Oliver Spasovsky was a vice president. Shekerinska left in March. She's not a Zaev loyalist. She's her own person. Right. This is Mila Tsarovska. Both are now out. Kovacevski will probably keep a nobody, a non-entity called Sanya Lukarevska as deputy leader of the party. She was appointed to this position to replace Shekerinska because they wanted to have a woman on this post, but she really does not represent anybody much in the party, so neither Zaev nor Kovacevski. So you have to go all the way down to the executive board, which is like 15 people, to find a proper, true Zaev loyalist in the face of Kostadinov, the person Zaev appointed as mayor of Strumica in his place. There is really no senior person you could say, okay, this guy speaks for Zaev fully. A powerful figure will likely be Mile Zicevic. He's a notorious secret police official, like all of them are, like almost at the rank of Verushevsky. He's being appointed secretary general of the party in place of Zaev's guy Ljubcho Nikolovsky. And Petr Šilegov, who is again absolutely not a Zaev loyalist, he's being appointed to the executive board, and he will likely be nominated as transportation minister, even though he lost the Skopje elections and prompted Zaev's resignation when he lost. Stefan Bogoev, who was mayor of Karposh, withdrew from the race before had another guy running his stead, and this guy lost. He is being appointed as vice president of the party. Bojan Maricic, who is Zaev's justice minister, he's kept on as international secretary, but again, even he is not a real loyalist to Zaev. You could say that maybe he is like semi-loyal, but again, they're not really people you could say that, a person you could say whose career depended on Zaev. So the big story is the absolute decimation of Zaev's people in the party. Zaev is quiet about this. Zaev is quiet about everything. He's actually really disappeared from public sight. Makes you wonder if he's planning to, if he's coordinating an evacuation of family and property and stuff like that to another country, or if he intends to control the party from the shadows, but it's going to be difficult. I mean, he does not have the people, the manpower in the party at the moment to control it. And the party is no longer poor like when he took it over. He had to actually spend his own money from the graft he had in the numerous grafts he had as mayor of Strumica to support the party. Now, they're in power, so they have all sorts of extortion, racketeering options in front of them, so they don't need his money either. So this is going to be the thing to watch, how the party treats Zaev in the future. And there is, because Zaev had a major break with Branko Crvenkovski, the former leader of the party. So any objections Shekerinska's wing had, they kept it under the carpet. But now Crvenkovski was very vocal about opposing Zaev's policy on Bulgaria a year ago, a policy of constant concessions. And in 1 year, practically Crvenkovski toppled Zaev, which is really a spectacular feat considering how high Zaev was elevated by the US, by the EU, by various circles. So in 1 year, after Branko said, you're out, and Zaev is out. Zaev is going to, Crvenkovski is going to install a person who was like a carbon copy of himself. What is Kosta Kostadinov to Zaev, this is Igor Ivanovsky to Branko Crvenkovski in the past. when Crvenkovski was the power in SDSM and in the country. So Igor Ivanovski is going to be named head of a new council for preparing policies, implementation of policies. And there are several other people who you would say are associated with Crvenkovski, who are now in the executive board, not too high up, but are included in the party. So on one hand we have reconciliation with Crvenkovski, possibly even some level of takeover of the party by Crvenkovski through his people, through Kovacevski, and on the other hand we have a major defeat for Zaev in the party, but we'll see how all of this develops. It's still early.
Yes, and that's a great analysis. Thank you for that, not only for our listeners, but for me, because there will not be a test after this, I hope, because that was just too many names. But it's interesting, I think, looking at Branko and then Zaev as the two most recent leaders of the party, essentially. Branko, first of all, he was president for one term. He could have probably run for a second term, but decided not to. But he kind of faded off into the distance, yet still remaining somewhat powerful. But he was, it seems to me at least, that he was content with that. He's what, early 60s, I think? He could actually still make a comeback if he ever wanted to. But it seems to me that he was just content to kind of stay in the background, keep his ill-gotten gains, drink his Johnny, etc. Whereas Zaev is, to my mind, a narcissist, first and foremost, and he loves to see his name and face in the papers and in print and on TV, etc. And so I think this is very painful for him to let go of this, and yet he still wants to see himself as the man in charge and pulling the strings, etc., which is perhaps why he plucked Kovacevski from seemingly nowhere. But yeah, it seems like events and people and institutions conspired to bring him down. As I wrote in my most recent column, he entered with a little help from his friends, and I think he exited with a little help from his friends. His friends being Kale, Kate, the U.S. State Department, NATO, the EU, etc. They put him there. They finally got tired of his antics and helped remove him, as did Branko and others. And what happens to him next? Good question. He's got a lot of business interests in Macedonia through his family. Not just drugs. I should say, legal cannabis and probably illegal, but other interests as well. He those are physical assets that exist there. He can't just up and leave those or up and move those, whether it's to Argentina or anywhere else. So it'll be then of course he's got his obligations that he made to Ali Ahmeti and Dewey, and I am sure that they are not happy with the way things have turned out since the local elections, when he suddenly said he was resigning from everything, and then he said he wasn't resigning, and then he said he was resigning, and finally he has resigned. But they have an invoice that they would like to give him that is still due, or that they have given him and is still due, and who knows what if they're going to ask for their pound of flesh, literally, figuratively, etc. from Zoran Zaev. So we'll see, and of course in terms of policy for SDSM, I think it's going to be pretty much the same as it was under Zaev. These are, to my mind at least, unrepentant godless communists that aren't going to change. They may have dropped Marx and Lenin and Mao, etc., but they're still going to champion their quote unquote progressive politics, which includes switching slightly over to Bulgaria right now, which includes still giving away whatever they can to Bulgaria in the faint hope that Bulgaria will allow Macedonia to begin EU accession talks at some point in 2022. Of course, Ali Ahmeti has just said that concessions still need to be made to Bulgaria. And even though we may have to save this for the next podcast, even though the new Prime Minister of Bulgaria, Petkov, what's his first name? Is it Kirill?
Kirill Petkov, yes.
Yeah, Kirill Petkov seems to be a quote-unquote more moderate kind of guy, Harvard educated.
Like, oh, sure, he went to Harvard.
He ain't. Plus, he's beholden to various other parties within the Bulgarian government and President Rumen Radev, who's a hardcore socialist. They're not going to change, and they're just going to demand more from Macedonia. And it's the question is whether or not Macedonia is going to give in more and more. Once you start giving in, and the other party sees that you give in, they're just going to ask for more, as Greece proved to be the point.
I mean, the thing to watch here will be, because Crvenkovski practically broke with Zaev and eventually toppled him over Bulgaria, over Zaev being seen as open to concessions to Bulgaria, which today there is practically an acknowledgement from the foreign minister Osmani. He says the Bulgarians, what they asked us is to sign off that the Macedonian language is derived from the Bulgarian and that the nation was created sometime in the 19th, 20th century. So this is what they want. Now, whether Crvenkovski believes this, whether this means that his people, his influence in the party, his ability to, let's say, withhold 20-30% of the voters for SDSM, which was evident in the local elections, and punish the party in this way. Whether if Kovacevski is now forced to sign a similar deal, something maximalist, along the maximum Bulgarian demands with this Kirill Petkov, the new prime minister of Bulgaria, whether then Crvenkovski rebels against this, prevents this, shuts this down, or, if the trick was only to use this as an excuse to bring down Zaev, playing on the, pro-Serbian factions and overall general spirit in the party. And then now that the mission is accomplished, once Zaev is out, once the party is back in his hands, now he can say, okay, fine, let this Kovacevski, nobody knows him, nobody cares about him, let him sign whatever is necessary, so we open EU accession talks and we remain in power, hopefully with the support of the US Embassy, and we carry on. So this will be the thing to watch. Of course, there will be some pressure on the new Prime Minister of Bulgaria to be more moderate, but he's the product of their president, who is Rumen Radev, who is adopting a more hard line. Now, whether there is going to be a break between them on this issue, we'll see. But Radev initially promised a 6-month period, after which he will lift the veto. He practically said this, not literally. And then he quickly followed up with several interviews. He keeps giving interviews to Financial Times, The Economist, The Politico, the same circle. In the latest one, he's now backtracking strongly on this promise that there is a date of 6 months after which the veto is lifted. So we'll see. But it would be very cynical, for Crvenkovski to use the Bulgaria issue to bring Zaev down, take the party from him once they're in power, and then just, then cave on the Bulgaria issue completely. And be, cynical, I mean hilarious, if that happens.
Right, yeah. So let's see, pivoting slightly, I should say, to the EU. Is it France that takes over the rotating presidency?
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got France taking over the rotating presidency of the EU, and they've got elections, I think, in April.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're going to be a bit preoccupied between now and then with the elections. And those elections are getting quite interesting, to my mind. Looking at some of the candidates, including Eric Zimor, I believe is how you pronounce his name.
Oh, I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
I'm here for the Macedonian pronunciation.
Oh, that's right. Sorry. Yes, if you want the French Content Farmers Podcast, that's a different channel. So, but anyway, so the EU perpetually, has got issues that it has to deal with. Of course, bad boys, Poland and Hungary, of course, are the perpetual fly in the ointment, so to speak, for the EU mothers and fathers that want to create a more perfect union, so to speak. then you've always got elections, France, etc. So I just don't see how the EU is going to be able to put any pressure on Bulgaria or make any real meaningful decisions between in the first 6 months of 2022. And of course, it was the agreement with, quote unquote, the agreement with Greece, the so-called Prespa agreement, that was supposed to usher in a period of light, sweetness, and peace eternal. Actually, I got that mixed up. It's sweetness, light, and I can't remember. Anyway, it was supposed to be let the good times roll for Macedonia by signing the so-called Prespa agreement, and Macedonia would enter the sunny uplands of both NATO and the European Union. Of course, sure, Macedonia entered NATO, albeit under a fictitious name, a name that those who sacrificed and bled and died for Macedonia through the centuries did not fight for or die for, something completely different. And Greece had dropped its objections, but as we discovered, as we always knew, frankly, NATO was a straight up or down one-time vote, and Greece dropped its objections like it said it would. But then there was the EU, and as we know, so EU membership requires the opening and closing and adherence to, or I should say streamlining the laws of the candidate country with the EU on the various chapters. And I believe there's 32 chapters of the, and I can't pronounce the French, the acquis communautaire or something like that.
Yeah, that's actually good, yeah.
Thank you. So, yeah, and in each one of those chapters, the EU members need to agree to the opening of the chapter, need to monitor the candidate country as it aligns its laws with the EU in that chapter, and then the closing of that chapter, and the EU members can object at any point in time. So that gives, by my count, if there's, just say, 32 chapters, that's 64 times that Bulgaria can object. And we haven't even got to the point where they're going to agree to open the first bloody chapter. But I think, going back to what I was started with here on the so-called Prespa agreement, I think it's interesting now that, assuming Dimitrov actually does leave, all of the signers and major authors of the so-called Prespa agreement are gone. So the first one to go was Nikos Kotzias, the former foreign minister of Greece, who, in a showdown with, what was his name, the defense minister? Come on.
Panos Kaminos.
Yes. Two large sumo wrestlers, and Kaminos won. And forced Kotzias out. Then Greece had the elections, and Tsipras got booted. Now Zaev has scored an own goal and is out, and Dimitrov is on his way out. So they're all out. You've got a new crop. You actually have interestingly enough, in Greece, you have what we would call the Conservative Party in power there. You still got the leftists in Macedonia, albeit with the quote-unquote new prime minister, new foreign ministers, new ministers, as we were speaking about earlier. And yet Macedonia is barely closer to its goals of peace, prosperity, and light eternal. That's it. Peace, prosperity, and light eternal.
I got it.
Yeah, for its citizens. Zaev has said that there is no alternative to the EU, which of course is a lazy argument, and it's an argument designed to shut down debate. It means, I don't want to hear what you have to say. We have to do it only one way, right side of history type of crap. And yet, if you look at polls, most Macedonians believe the country is going in the wrong direction. Most Macedonians are hurting financially. We are in the middle of winter, of course. Energy prices are going up. You can speak perhaps a little bit more to the whole energy situation there, because I can't follow it. I know Macedonia depends, 50% on coal?
No, more. Like 70, 80% is domestic production normally before the collapse this year. And of that, about 70% of those 70% would be from coal. So yeah, okay, you're right. Maybe 50% in total, yes.
Yeah, but right now, of course, in the dead of winter, I'm sure the wind farms and the solar panels work quite well.
Yes,
they provide lots of
We don't even have them. We have like 5, 6 wind turbines
Down
and
near Steep.
few speculative. No, it's down near Gevgelia,
Oh, that's
near
right, yeah.
Valandova, actually.
That's right. Yeah.
And there are 2 speculative contracts I've signed for a solar and a wind farm, but he's giving them very good land to build them on. So we're suspecting that he's actually trying to sell the farmland using this as an excuse. And there are some people from Bulgaria who do marijuana farming with Zaev, who are appearing as the owners of these ostensibly German and French companies. So yeah, it's a big mess.
Okay. Well, going back to my mini rant there. So yeah, energy prices going up. You're struggling to keep homes and businesses warm and schools warm through. You got COVID. You haven't had. I'd say Omicron hasn't quite made it yet to Macedonia.
We have one guy, and we're keeping him under watch. Some British bastard.
Give him to Rachel. She can keep him locked up in the embassy there. Well, it will eventually come to you too, as it does everywhere apparently. It's called the common cold. So you got that. Kids are, 2 days now. Kids will be out of school for a couple of weeks, but if Omicron comes, who knows what the government's going to do in terms of lockdowns and kids studying from home, etc. Plus, you got basically 2 years of them essentially studying from home and no social interaction and all of the damaging psychological effects that come with that. Lack of foreign direct investment, not to mention all the corruption scandals that have occurred under the Zaev administration. And yet, Prespa was supposed to make everything right and beautiful, and yet it hasn't. So what does that tell you? Well, number one, it tells you don't put your faith in politicians, that's for sure. Of the right or of the left, frankly. Although, somebody's got to govern, so which is why I usually place my bets on the right, because they have better policies than the left.
There is a market difference. You
Yeah.
can't compare the
Yeah,
two.
true, of course. Yes, there is. But yeah, and somebody has to govern. So, but again, all of these things were was supposed to be. Life was supposed to be much, much better now, especially, what is this, almost 3 years, no, see, Prespo signed in 2018, so we're coming up on 4 years, 4 years, 3
Nothing
years,
but them.
3 years in January or February since the Parliament voted illegally to change the name and the identity and everything else, and yet where are we, as I've got this quote from Reuters from a few years ago from Dimitar when he says, and I'm paraphrasing, he says, a few years from now, we'll all look back and say, gosh, why didn't we do this earlier? This was such a great idea.
No, it's a complete failure. It actually birthed the dispute with Bulgaria, which was existent, but not at this level. I mean, not at this level of rhetoric. The Bulgarians knew that Gruevski will not back down to Greece, much stronger and much greater pressure put on him, and they knew that if they open a dispute with him, they will probably be humiliated in the sense that Macedonia will put a monument, produce a movie, rewrite books to make it even more assertive, so they wouldn't F around to find out, and we practically had a detente on the issue. So the result was there was no relatively less arguing. I often go to Twitter, to prove this point. I go to there are historic dates when we escalate our arguments, let's say the day of the start of the Macedonian uprising, the communist uprising against the Bulgarian occupation in 1941, and you would get this typical slur words Macedonians would use about Bulgarians, and you go to a Gruevski year, 2012, 2013, 2014, on this date, and there is nothing on Twitter when you type in these slur words, and you go to a Zaev year, after we had signed the treaty of friendship and we should be friends, and relations have improved, and you have this everybody shouting at everybody else on social media, especially after they officially vetoed us in 2020. So, situation has gotten worse. We're blocked for the EU. We joined NATO, but nobody really cares about that here. It just gives you a great opportunity to possibly be killed while patrolling the Donbas border with Ukraine. We have under Gruevski would open up or either break ground or complete a new manufacturing company each month. At least this was the impression you would get in the mid and the late period of his term, once his investment, this direct attraction of investment policies were fully in place. Now we have a spiking inflation, like it's really noticeable. I've switched the supermarket from like a Whole Foods to a Costco. And, bunches of people would have done this even before I did. There's even like, you would get people you would consider posh. They would let it slip on the social media. Like, okay, I was shopping in Stokomak or Kam, which are our versions of the cheaper supermarkets here. People are buying bulk. Like, okay, can I buy flour in a 5 kilo bag instead of a half a kilo or a kilo? And energy. So now we have a double hit. So on one hand, they completely mismanaged or not mismanaged, but actually corruptly destroyed the crucial coal plant we have in the country, the Bitola coal plant, and it's now almost not operating, almost producing like the barest minimum of electricity. And we had the external hit of the Russia deciding to hike the prices of gas, or maybe it's a global thing. So we have electricity prices are spiking, and in January we'll have a huge increase. And for households it will be like 10%, but for businesses it's going to be probably around 30%, which means it will translate in all other costs. And now the heating company which uses gas, it demands a tripling of the price, which is going to be, I mean, they will not get the tripling, but they're going to get a huge increase as well next year. So it's all a complete a body blow to the living standards of the people, on top of the daily humiliation and the corruption and the failure to control the coronavirus to the level that we are among the worst performers in the world, definitely in Europe. So yeah, that's Zaev's legacy in short.
And yet, I
and also the Americans' legacy, because they brought him in power.
Absolutely, that's true. Although I like to point out, it's the State Department's legacy. So
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we have to place blame where it is due, and that would be with the State Department, not all Americans. So. And with the Biden administration, and obviously the Trump administration. Although again, I think it's worth pointing out that the State Department seems to do its own thing, no matter who's in charge, generally.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of the way it is. So I think going back to as I recall, not too long ago, the international think tanks and foundations like to do lots of events in Macedonia or nearby, or during the pandemic on Zoom, etc., extolling the virtues of Zoran Zaev and SDSM, etc., and those seem to have dropped off the past 6 months or so. And I don't think that they're going to be doing one anytime soon in 2022, talking about the virtues of Zaevism and things of that nature, because there just really isn't anything there. So.
I have a feeling he just wants to not catch anybody's eye and to disappear. And
you mean he wants to live?
Yeah, and that's if people would just stop talking about him, do not mention him. I have a feeling this would be great for him. That he considers this the best outcome at the moment.
He can take his ill-gotten gains and go spend them in whatever country or he decides to live in, or try and just keep his head down there in Macedonia.
Yeah.
Well, we will see.
Yeah.
I think it's time now, Svetlin, for our farmer's pick.
Hey, we're doing it again.
We're doing it again. Yeah, we really need to get back in this habit. I think it's a good habit to end on a high note. You know, as the ghost of Christmas Present told Scrooge in A Christmas Carol, there are more good things in life than you can possibly imagine. And as I like to say, there are more good things in Macedonia than you can possibly imagine. And so we'll put this in the show notes, but I found this, and it's just from September of this year, so it's relatively new. And Touropia is the website. 10 best places to visit in Macedonia. Quote, a fascinating country to explore that is still very much off the beaten path. Macedonia is blessed with incredible natural beauty and an intoxicating mix of cultures that draws on both Balkan and Mediterranean influences. Ruled at various times by the Romans, Ottomans, Serbs, and Soviets, okay, that last part isn't true, there are a wealth of historic sites dotted around the country. Among the best places to visit in Macedonia are old monasteries and hilltop fortresses. Mosques, Orthodox churches, and amazing archaeological ruins are also prevalent. And many of its cities have delightful old bazaars at their heart, which date back to the Ottoman times. Its mountainous landscape is home to glittering lakes and tinkling waterfalls, with its 3 national parks are full of beautiful hiking trails that weave their way amongst the verdant hills and valleys. With its often turbulent past now behind it, Macedonia's wealth of stunning tourist attractions makes it a fantastic, little-known destination that has a plethora of amazing things to see and do. Oh, I love this website. They got the word plethora in there. That's fantastic. And it's got, so again, the 10 best places to visit Macedonia. It goes from 10 to 1, and of course, you can probably guess what number 1 is, which is Lake Ohrid. Although the first one is Strumica, which is a beautiful town, despite some of its past rulers. So, got, of course, Mavrovo, Tikvesh wine region, Bitula, you know, all the great hits of Macedonia. So we'll put that in the show notes. For the novice who perhaps hasn't been to Macedonia, or for those who haven't been in a long time, it's a good reminder of all of the great things to see and to do in Macedonia.
Excellent. Well, try to get some more good news in the next episode.
Absolutely, yes.
Now that Zaev is out, we'll have to find something else to talk about.
there will always be plenty of things to talk about in Macedonia.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, that's good catching up on the quote-unquote new or soon-to-be Prime Minister of Macedonia and his cast of characters that he'll be installing, and we'll just kind of follow it. All right.
Yep.
Good talking to you, Svetlin.
You too, buddy. Take care.